to find those, like I said, those limiting beliefs, those parts in them that tell them what they can or cannot do. Like, for example, I work a lot with the inner critic, what people tell themselves, how they are so hard on themselves, so it almost prevents them from moving forward and from changing. It's a very real interaction, coaching. It's very real, and you meet this person at a much deeper level, and I try to see them for who they truly are. Like, of course, they tell me everything they can't do and all their problems and all their issues and what's wrong with them. But then I try to see them for who they really are. And I think that's my gift, what I can do to support someone. Your mind, your brain is also a muscle, and you have to work and to practice to recognize when you're not present anymore and when you drift away.
Welcome to the Alpha Mind podcast, hosted by Stephen Goldstein and Mark Randall. Before we head into this week's podcast, a quick thank you to our long-term podcast partner, the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, who provide outstanding educational services and support services for people across the world of trading. Amongst their many outstanding services, the STA offer their brilliant home study course in technical analysis. This course is offered to listeners of the Alpha Mind podcast at a discount. You can find out more about this discount by going to our website, alpha-mind.net. The home study course has been put together by many of the world's leading technical analysts exclusively for the Society of Technical Analysts and takes you into a far deeper understanding of what technical analysis is and how to apply it effectively. Now, on with this week's podcast. Welcome to this week's Alpha Mind podcast, where we're delighted to have, I suppose in a way, an old friend of the podcast on the show, in that her name is Anna Fuhrmann, and her husband Sven has been a previous guest on the podcast. Sven runs a hedge fund based in Switzerland, Zug to be precise, and he was a guest on the podcast a couple of years ago. Anna is his wife, and I've known Anna for a bit longer than we've known Sven because she is an executive coach. She studied in the same executive coaching organisation as me many years ago, so we came to know each other through that connection. And now she's working as an executive coach with people in the financial market and the investment industry. She calls herself an executive in self-leadership. So how you lead yourself, whether you're leading others in teams, in businesses, or whether you're leading yourself in terms of the work you do in engaging with markets. So I hope I've described that correctly, Anna. And maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself and then maybe a little bit about the topic or theme you really want to talk about. That will be, I think, will be hugely fascinating for them as an audience listening.
Thank you, Steve, so much for that introduction. I'm very happy and grateful to be here today. I do remember the first time that we met, I think almost 10 years ago, and you became my mentor initially. And I'm a psychologist and coach, so I studied psychology in Switzerland here, and then I did that executive coaching training, and since then I combine those two professions in a way that I coach traders and people in the financial industry, high performers, but by combining psychology and coaching. So I go quite deep in my process with my clients. And that's really what I love doing and what I have been doing the last, almost like 10 years. And it's funny that you mentioned Sven, because it was also, when I introduce myself to people, of course, there's always this billions thing coming up. Like people start, like making funny faces and they say, oh yeah, are you like this couple in billions, the hedge fund trader and the wife, or no, the colleague who's a psychologist. And of course, it's funny, but it was also something I had to work through, to build my reputation and to really, explain to people what I'm doing and how powerful the coaching process can be.
Yes, Anna, welcome to the show, and it's great to have someone from Switzerland here, and of course, great to have someone on the podcast that's got their own portfolio of clients, including traders and leaders in the trading community as well. Now, these client types, and of course, Steve and I have got clients too, and sometimes we see certain patterns in the commonality of certain things that are coming up as the challenges. So when folk turn up with you, is there a pattern? Is there a common sort of set of credentials they carry with them when you start to speak to them? I've seen this before, and maybe it's something you've seen a lot of times before. What are the common things that are turning up when people, they're coming to you for help, ultimately? They're coming to you for help and guidance.
Yeah.
So what's the why? Why have they made that decision to come to you, and what are those challenges? Is it merely stuck in a loop, or is there something else going on?
I think very often the why really is something more superficial, like they are losing money, for example. But then when I start working with them and we go deeper into the process, the why is really that they have limiting beliefs that keep them stuck in this kind of negative mindset. And that's really the why oftentimes. And this negative mindset can then lead to, they end up in this vicious circle because they are getting more stressed. Their nervous system gets activated because they, for example, keep losing money. So they're getting more stressed. They end up in survival mode. And it's really, really hard to get out of that. So that's most of the times the moment when they come to see me and ask for help.
So they're stuck in the loop. They've got fight or flight going on there. They've forgotten about all the processes. They're just, autopilot bad habits, just, doing the same old and, not having the appropriate focus that trading needs. And so what approach, if I was that person that's come to you and saying, look, I'm stuck in this loop. I've had week after week of drawdown. Pretend I'm the client. How do you then go deeper? What's your process of going? I'm interested to know your process of how you get into the weeds, as we say.
Yeah, I love that question, and I also love your picture because that's also my intention, to not just cut the weeds, but then really go to the root of the problem. So oftentimes when a client comes to see me, the first step is really gaining more clarity and more awareness of what's going on in that moment. And then also working out like a goal and a vision for our time together for the coaching process. So I really asked them, and I really tried to help them go deeper and think about, like, how do you want to show up? How do you want to be? Let's say if we do a coaching for 6 months, how do you want to be in 6 months or in 12 months? How do you want to feel? How do you want to, what do you want to think? What kind of thoughts do you want to have in your mind? But also then bringing it to a more physical level, how do you want to feel in your body when you're working? How does it feel to make money? How does it feel to be relaxed and focused and have like a positive attitude towards your work? And then when we know where they want to go, when they have created this goal or this vision, then we can really look at, okay, where are you now? Where are you now? What's the problem? What's holding you back? Where are you also in terms of finances, right? Like, what's your financial goal for the future? But where are you now? And then from this now to there, from the now to the vision and the goal, we're looking then at the patterns and those habits. What's not working? What is keeping you from achieving this goal and from creating your vision and to really get there? And that is something I would say that's more the psychological work I then do. So we try to find those, like I said, those limiting beliefs, those parts in them that tell them what they can or cannot do. Like, for example, I work a lot with the inner critic, what people tell themselves, how they are so hard on themselves, so it almost prevents them from moving forward and from changing.
Yeah, that question, what gets in your way of performing in terms of trading, and the answer normally is, well, you're getting in your own way. So you've talked about someone coming to you with a problem, but I know from the work I do, there are people that come to me that they want the skill set and the behaviors in place, so when they come across a challenge, they don't have a problem. So they feel as though they've got a toolkit to go forward with actually, operating in markets, but with a toolkit that gives them confidence. Do you have something like that as well, that come to you because they just want to perform better, not necessarily that they come to you with a problem?
Yeah, of course, like those who are more proactive and they already want to equip themselves now and have the tools and the resources and build up this resilience to then be able to face those challenges that might show up in the future. I think, nevertheless, it's important to look at these blocks and those patterns that a person has. But for example, if somebody comes to me and says, well, like you described, they want to be more prepared for challenges that might show up in the future, then I think also this mindset work is really powerful, and especially the mindset around money, because we all project something very different on money. Like for every person, money means something different. And for example, for somebody, it might mean security or freedom or independence or status, for example. And then when you think about it, what does that mean then in return? Does it mean if you lose money, you lose your freedom, you lose your security and your and feelings or your safety? And then that triggers the nervous system, and that will show up probably in a fight or flight or freeze response, because when we have this feeling, or it's actually our brain cannot differentiate between what's reality and what's an imagined threat. So if we have a feeling of I lose security, I lose my freedom, that will still, even if it's just in our thoughts, that will create and trigger this fight or flight response. And in turn, you cannot function on a high level, because this part of your brain that is responsible for the survival of the human being prevents them from thinking logically, making the right decisions, and planning ahead, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And on the extreme at the other end, though, if someone comes to you and they're in the fight or flight, so it's not just a problem, it is a significant problem. I imagine that your approach is you're now thinking, okay, I need to start to really engage with some tools now to get this person back into a stable state, an optimal state of performance, or even being, as we would say. So what sort of methodology do you use to for someone that's basically falling apart, burning up?
Someone that's really high, like activated in survival mode.
Activated in everything, survival mode.
Yeah. I think when somebody like that comes and see me, I think that's already the first most important step, because they did already the reflection and they reached out for help. But then oftentimes, especially with traders, there's so much in their heads, right? So they sit on their desk many hours a day. Many markets are open 24 hours, so they always have those numbers and those markets on their mind. So when somebody comes then to me, oftentimes I try to bring them back into their body, like doing, for example, somatic exercises, for example, vision exercises where they can look in a peripheral from left to right. Yeah, exactly. Because when we are stressed and in survival mode, we tend to be in this vision tunnel. And working on a desk and on a computer reinforces this vision because we're just looking in one direction for the whole day. So when I do somatic exercises with them and they actually can move their heads, take in their environment, connect to all their 5 senses, it gives the brain a sense of safety. And this is actually something, as you all know, probably it's the reptile brain. The amygdala is the part in our brain that has been there since Stone Age, and it gets activated, and it's there to keep us safe, right? Our brains are designed to keep us safe and not to make us happy. So when we in the olden days were threatened by a lion, for example, we had to be highly, like, super focused. You had to have your blood sugar, your blood pressure up, and really prepare for fight or flight. But now, in the modern times, when you work on a desk and you're not, you're just in this highly focused state, and you cannot break this stress response that can really take a toll on your health, mental health and physical health.
Yeah, and I think the amygdala triggered the reptile brain, which is not particularly large. It's the end of the spine. It's the ancient brain that we all have. When that brain is triggered, the clever brain is just offline. So you're not, when you're in this flight, fight, freeze, or faint type mode of been triggered, you're certainly not able to look at anything complicated because that prefrontal cortex is switched off, because the focus and energy of the brain has just gone into the old ancient protection mode. And of course, traders can be in that state for day after day. I mean, if unattended, people can just go to bed, bad sleep, wake up, do the same again, staring, not paying attention to themselves. I've seen somebody get a mini stroke over the course of a week as a consequence of not being able to let go of that loop and move on from it. But as a consequence, in that state, when you're trying to perform in that state, I mean, you're barely performing, but you're in a complex world like trading. You've got no appetite for focusing on things that are complicated and solving complex, levels of inquiry to be able to make an appropriate trading decision. So you'll start making stupid mistakes. And so I think traders do need to recognize. And I remember I did a test with a particular client where I actually showed them a fixed mindset sort of map. A chart ahead with poor sleep, lack of attention, all the sort of adjectives you could put around fixed mindset. And I showed it to a bunch of 50 traders or whatever in this particular course I was running, and they all just said, "Yeah, that's me."
Yeah.
And I think it's a very common state for them to be in, just because of that environment. So for those that can understand that state, recognize that state, be aware and be honest enough to say, yeah, that's my current state and that's not good. And then having a process of going through with a coach or whatever to turn that negative mindset, it's very negative as well, into something that's a growth mindset. There might be a very subtle shift from being slightly negative to slightly positive, but that's a very, very big shift.
Yeah.
In terms of,
and the problem is you can stay in this zone, in this survival mode for quite a while. So it
might be your normality. You might just think this is just normal.
Yeah.
and you need to talk through with someone to understand that that's not the best state you can be in. And actually that state from a health point of view, is, certainly reduces your immune system. It does all sorts of things to, longevity, and I've got a whole host of people I can tell you that are not here any longer because they suffered from being in that space and not being managed. But anyway, I think we need to throw this open to Steve and bring Steve into this conversation. I know he's listening carefully, but he's got some things to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's it's just, you really triggered a few things for me here, and hopefully it triggered a few things in our audience, the people listening, because for me, when we do this job, when someone does this job of trading, for me there's three pillars to doing this job well. That you have to become strong in all three of them, and it's more complex than that because the three pillars overlap. They all rely on each other, and that's what I call the pillar one being analysis. So how you sit down and you analyze a market, and you follow the market, you follow the variables, whether it's a fundamental variable, a technical variable. It could be based on observation of price action or sentiment, sort of developing a feeling. All these different inputs that are drivers of the price in the market or the behavior of a market. That's one. And from that, we then, that leads us to taking a trade, putting a risk on, or that leads us to the management of the trade or the de-escalation, the exit of a trade. And that second part is risk. That's the risk process. That's where you actually decide to put money at risk in the market based on your analysis. So there's your second pillar, the risk process. And then there's a third pillar, and that's the bit we're talking about, which everyone knows, but doesn't do an awful lot to address, the self pillar.
Yeah.
Okay. You decide you described yourself as an executive coach in self leadership, and this job is all about the self. And the three pillars, they overlap. If you manage yourself well, you will do the analysis better. If you manage yourself well, you will do the risk process. You will execute the risk process better. And then you will also execute the overlap between the analysis and the risk process better, the formulating of risk ideas through the analytical process. And then you get the kind of the core of all three coming together. But people, in my opinion, and I know because I've been there as a trader, and I know because of the work I've done as a coach, they give scant attention to that third pillar. And yet it is so vital, as you said, and something really jumped out at me when you said something just now about this concept of a vision tunnel, of us being caught, almost mesmerized by these screens and the numbers flying around on the screens and the chart lines and the news and the research we read, and when we get lost, we are so lost in our world, we cannot differentiate between a real threat and an imagined threat.
Exactly.
That was fascinating. That's, I often, when I hear that in my clients, I often call it catastrophizing. It's imagining the worst possible outcome and almost making it like it's real and it's there and it's present when it's not. Yeah.
And that's a part of them speaking. It's a part that tries to protect them from failing. It's catastrophizing and making the threat really big.
Yeah.
To put them in fight or flight or fight mode, probably.
Well, it puts them
to keep them safe.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think all of those modes, fight, flight, or freeze, are all unhelpful modes of how to be in this job when your job is executing your process.
Yes.
The moment you go into that mode, it's probably distracting. It's probably unhelpful. I can picture myself in it. It becomes panic mode. And I fight with the market. Now, that's not a good thing to do because the market's not fighting with me. It doesn't really care. Or I flee from the market, which is not helpful either. Or I might even just freeze. Again, all three states are unhelpful.
Yeah, and that's why I try always to explain my clients in quotation marks a little bit about neuroscience. Of course, you don't want to make it too academic, the whole conversation, but I think especially for traders who are very analytical, very logical thinking people, if they understand that it's neuroscience, it's how their brain is wired, and also it is their brain trying to keep them safe, I think then you can try and understand how to figure out ways and learn strategies to get out of this mode. Because the thing is, the brain cannot be you cannot activate the prefrontal cortex where logical thinking is happening and the amygdala at the same time. But if you are, of course, if someone is really not high functioning anymore, that's another story. But if you're still healthy and able to work and able to access your thoughts and your feelings, then you can willingly try to shift from the panic mode, shift to something more logical. For example, one exercise I tell my clients, and it sounds funny, but do like a difficult math challenge. If you notice, and I think that's the critical point, that's the critical thing, you have to learn to notice when you are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, and you notice it's not helping you. If you notice that, then, for example, do a math challenge. Try to solve a math problem, because then you have to activate willingly the part of your brain that is responsible for logical thinking, for problem solving. And in that moment, when you do that, the amygdala cannot be online. So it helps you to get out of this mode. And it's similar with journaling. And I know I hear from so many people, oh, I tried journaling. Journaling is like something woo-woo, They, in the beginning, they don't love this idea about writing in a journal, but it's the same approach. It is activating the part of your brain where logical thinking is processed, writing, reading, exactly, math challenges, all of that. So I think it's such a powerful way, like very underestimated way to get out of this fight or flight mode.
We will return to this podcast shortly. Just a quick reminder about our podcast sponsor, the Society of Technical Analysts, a brilliant organisation which help traders and analysts from across the spectrum of markets. They have many fantastic programs, including the new Technical to Trading System program. Also, do check out their brilliant home study course, and Alpha Mind listeners can get a discount on that. Just go to our website, alpha-mind.net, to find out more about that. You can find out more about the Society of Technical Analysts by going to their website, technicalanalysts.com. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how we can be the leading character in our own disaster movie that we absolutely totally believe, that triggers literally a fight or flight response. I think I know that there's been analysis in terms of the impact of meditation and mindfulness on the size of the amygdala. It can reduce the size of it, and that comes me onto this thing about knowing what presence is and what presence means, and knowing when you're not present, and being aware of yourself to be able to monitor yourself in real time. If you can do that, which like the Jordans and the messes of this world are able to be as present as possible and
Mhm.
notice if they've been distracted into the disaster movie, with the negative implications. But if you can manage presence, and I certainly am advocating that presence is an intelligence, and it's I know you've got emotional intelligence, you've got intelligence per se, but personally, I think presence itself is an intelligence where you've got that awareness and self-compassion of monitoring yourself and being able to notice that you've drifted, but then do something about it, change of state, whatever, or multiple hacks to get you back into the present moment. It's going to drift. We know that. But if I've been on a balancing buoy, if you can get that balance and stay there, that then becomes, certainly in my view, an answer to a lot of these problems, having the ability and the confidence to know what presence is and actually do something about it.
The balancing for I like that, Mark.
Yeah, but it is hard work.
Yeah,
I think we have to realize you have to practice it, like going to the gym. Your mind, your brain is also a muscle, and you have to work and to practice to recognize when you're not present anymore and when you drift away.
Exactly. And I like the balancing board thing, because if you imagine that if you do it physically, you're strengthening your core by so you're strengthening a muscle. You're strengthening a mental muscle by bringing yourself, or noticing a drift off presence, bringing yourself back to being present. That's neuroplasticity in action. You strengthening a mental muscle.
Can I bring in a real story from my own existence as a trader?
Yeah, I'm
something that happened when I journaled, when I was lost and in a very bad headspace. And it was in about early November 2007. I used to journal I'm holding up an A4 folder. This isn't the one, this is the one beforehand. As you can see, I used to jot notes down in there. I used to jot analysis as well, views on markets, but then commentary on how I did things, or when I was stressed, or when I'd done something daft, which was most of the time. Now, I had this big trade on in October 2007. I won't go into the ins and outs of it, but I positioned myself quite aggressively over a US central bank meeting, hoping that there would be an announcement at this meeting that would be favourable for my position. I got the result I wanted, and I'd left the position on over the meeting, and unfortunately I made a mistake of not stopping it, of not taking the stop off. So I used to have a stop on my trades, but I used to remove them for volatile events so that we wouldn't get taken out by a market liquidity spike. I forgot to do that on this case. I disappeared from the office after the meeting for about, 20 minutes to get a bite to eat, and came back, and my head broker was screaming at me, "Steve, you've been stopped out. Can you confirm you've..." And I was like, no, I can't have been stopped out. The price was it was a long way away from my price. And I looked at the screen, and there was a very sharp, aggressive spike move. It hit my level at a very low of the market, and then bounced off that and took off. And it was an expensive mistake. Now, rather than just re-put the position on, I tried to be clever. I tried to, I should have just accepted that little loss I had at that point, relatively small, big on the day, but relatively small in terms of the bigger view I had, and just replaced the position and accept I'd been a bit of an idiot. But I tried to be clever. Let me work my way back into this position. And over the next week, the market just moved almost in a straight line away from me. It was a massive move. Okay. And I hadn't put the trade back on. And I was furious. I was fuming. I was lost in my head. I was sitting there. Not only had I taken a bit of a loss, but I'd missed a huge opportunity.
Mm.
And I was livid. And this went on for about a week. And I was, I was this whole mixture of emotions going on. I almost couldn't talk to anyone around me. I barely could function.
Mm.
I don't know whether I was flight or freeze, but I was all of those in one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sitting at work, and I used to keep my journal on my desk at arm's reach. And one day, about mid-morning or mid-afternoon, I just pulled it out, and I thought I'd start writing. I'd start reflecting my views, my opinions, how I felt, what I'd done, where I'd gone wrong, reminding myself what my process was, how I do this. And I wrote about 3 pages in about 5 minutes. And then at the end of it, I just had this clarity, which I'd not had for a whole week since then, which was just put the bloody trade back on. There's still loads to go. And I couldn't see that. And yet it'd been visible to me all the time. And I just could not see what was in front of my eyes. Even though I'd missed a lot, the idea I had was working, and it still had a long way to play out.
Mm-hmm.
Had I not written in that journal, I don't think I'd have put that trade back on. I put the trade back on, and it became one of the best trades I'd ever done. It had a huge move over the next 4 weeks, and I made a lot of money on it. But it was down to journaling and nothing else.
Yeah, I would be curious what happened in that moment when you came back from the meeting and you noticed or you realized that you made this mistake. And
I wasn't at the meeting. I popped out the office, came back. Broker said, "Steve, you've been stopped out."
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked because I really hadn't expected that. And in the immediate point was, it was only a very small loss at that point if I replaced the trade. But I thought I'd try and be clever. I thought I'd try and repair the situation. Okay, now I could have just put the trade back on. Everything would have been fine. But, we have a phrase in the market. I don't know if Mark, it's called being a dick for a tick. Okay. It's like, I was being a dick for a tick.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up costing me a huge amount of ticks. So by the end of that night, I surrendered a lot of opportunity. I thought maybe the next day I'll get a chance to get back into the market again. And then the market just screamed away from me the next day, the day after that. I even made mistakes of trying to be clever and go the other way, thinking I could make some money back. That kept going against me. I became lost in this kind of maelstrom I became lost in myself. That was kind of when you used that phrase, I had complete tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't seeing the reality of the situation, the clear picture. I was, I suppose, just feeling a complete fool.
Yeah, but it must have been more than that. There must have been anxiety that went with that as well.
Anger.
Yeah, I mean, and the lack of
anger is like a very hot emotion. It's like a surface level emotion. So
there was probably some shame.
I don't know how deep you want to go, but there's often
there was probably shame involved in it. I know shame is a really powerful emotion.
If only you knew about mindfulness back then.
If only I did.
But he has a journal, so he practices what he's preaching.
Exactly.
I've got a journal. I've got a whole pile of my journals, and it's one of the ones in there. It is so powerful because it literally, until I pulled my journal out and started writing, I couldn't believe how much difference it made.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of return to clarity. It was almost like magic.
Mark, what's your strategy, your go-to when you notice yourself losing yourself in yourself?
Well, if I look back when I was losing myself in the late 80s, where, it was trauma, it was blackouts, it was nervousness before super big data, and it was being scared, to be honest. It came about at a time when I was diagnosed with an arthritic back condition, so the level of sport I was doing in the background was reducing. And it was something that I was taught during a kung fu sort of series of lessons back in about 10 years beforehand, so late 70s, that a conversation with my mother about something that my grandmother was very interested in, which was healing. It linked up with me remembering the stuff we did in kung fu, which was basically a meditation practice. So I adopted this, and my world changed rapidly, and I made it my own. I stylized it. I did some visualization work as well with it, which I still teach today, and it has profound effects on people. But it was giving me a toolkit to, as we talked about earlier, to have something in hand just in case the wheels fell off again. Actually, it meant that I could see the wheels falling off before they fell off, and could actually start to do something about it quite naturally and instinctively without having to think about it. And even challenging conversations, I'd find myself actually stepping outside mentally and looking at these two people talking, one of which was me, and I was just observing them. And it's only after it happened I realized, crikey, I had this power, and we call it superpower. And it felt like that. I guess I had this ability of managing self that was at a profound level. When everyone else was in chaos, I was the person that would be relatively calm, still would have my faculty intact to make right decisions and explore, pathways and opportunities where others were confused. And it was just something that I guess by accident, but I don't know whether it was by accident, whether it was meant to happen, but it happened that I adopted that practice, and that practice gave me the ability to develop a very, very high level of presence, but also the very high ability of knowing when I wasn't present and having something I could do to get myself to be present again. That did me well. And if I coach something, I will teach them some of that methodology if that seems appropriate for them, because I don't think people do enough of it. I think people talk about the problem, but actually there are mechanisms to actually make the problem easier if it arises, so that you can push through it and get back to being in the market. If you're in a trading career, because otherwise, if you don't, we know that you just become in this loop of despair, and despair leads to anxiety leads to depression leads to recurring depression, and then you've got a medical problem. And that there's a lot of evidence that people in markets, some unfortunately, get to that extent where it becomes, recurring depression is the problem, and that's a significant medical problem, as you know. So if my job is to give people a toolkit to at least not them to get to that level of despair, but there's going to be lumps and bumps, but if they've got the confidence and the presence to be able to deal with it proactively, then as far as I'm concerned, job done.
Just a quick word before we return to the podcast about Alpha Mind. We do offer a host of services focused on developing individual, team and leadership performance across trading businesses. We work with many clients across the world from all sorts of fields, including hedge funds, investment banks, asset managers, commodity businesses, trading businesses and prop firms, as well as working with individuals who also would like to find out more about how they can improve their performance. So to find out more about us, just email us info@alpha-mind.net and we'd be happy to connect with you and tell you more about our services. Now back to the podcast. I'm going to jump in here because, I love the work you do, Anna. I know myself and Mark, we're both in similar fields, so we know how important it is. But I think what Mark was saying and what I was saying is when we were involved as practitioners in this job, we were both stuck in a bad place for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark, you did something about it. Okay. You self kind of regulated in a way. I self-regulated in that moment, but in previous parts of my career, I wasn't able to do that. And I wonder if this is a particular problem. I mean, this is predominantly a male-orientated career. Most of the people in this job are men. Men are really bad at talking out their issues. It's well documented. We see this in sport. We see this in many fields. Men have a much higher suicide rate, a much higher rate of, I think, depression, I think men suffer from, because they don't talk about these issues. There's a sense of shame with failing as a man or not achieving what you aim to achieve.
Yeah.
There's the mental health aspect of this as well, which of course comes to affect your performance. It's that full cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just from what you both were describing, I think it's beautiful to see and also to keep in mind that for every person, it can be a different approach. Like for you, journaling really works. For you, Mark, you said when you get into this meditative state, it's really, becoming aware of your presence and your true self. I think it's really about trying out different things, and that's I agree with what you were saying around, like, it's a very male dominated profession. When you look into the research around the effects of therapy, like there's no difference between men and women how deep they can go. It just takes more like women are more easy, like stereotypically speaking, to they're more easy to talk about problems, but it still takes some time to go deeper. Whereas men maybe are more hesitant to talk about their issues, but then when they feel they have a space where they can feel safe and they trust the person they are talking to, they can also tap into this deeper level of what they're experiencing and their feelings. So I guess it's really about providing the space and building the trust so that they can open up and really start talking about it. Because I agree with what you're saying. The problem is real, and the mental health struggles and the suicidal rates are real problems. And what's sad is that when you come to this point where you lose hope, then it's really where it becomes like a big problem. But how can we? Mm-hmm.
There's an area here where I think is untapped in the industry. Okay,
say that again. Sorry.
There's an area here where I think is untapped in the industry. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's a very psychological profession. It's a very lonely profession. It's very much like you mentioned earlier. It's very much here in the mind. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you're going to do this well, you're going to succeed in the 3 different pillars of trading. You're going to succeed in your ability to analyze markets and find good trading ideas. You're going to succeed in your ability to take and manage risk and have a constructive risk process. And you're going to succeed in your ability to manage yourself on a daily basis, on a continual basis all the time. So you can do all of these well, okay, and hold yourself, remain resilient so that you manage the incredible ups and downs that go with this job so that you can make the best decisions. My thing is that the stuff we do with the exception of a few people, most people only want to talk about when things go wrong. This should be something that people are talking about all the time. It should be something that is a feature of people in this business, that, you know, that they have this person they can talk to. I mean, I know you joked about Billions and Wendy at the beginning. Okay. But that's based off real life situations, where I think that was based off Steve Cohen, the character who played Billions. And, you know, Steve Cohen was known for always having coaches, always having these people that he could go and talk to outside of the market and would be really helpful. And a lot of very successful traders have these people, these confidants, these people they can unload to, because they're dealing with incredibly challenging situations. For me as a trader, working with a coach changed my career trajectory. And anyone who's listened to this podcast over the years have heard me talk about how powerful coaching was in my own trading career. That it didn't just help me out of a difficult spot, but it powered me actually to be a much better trader going forward, a much more successful trader. Had I not had that, you know, my career would have probably ended much sooner, and I would have probably just gone into do something else and would have been none the wiser. So it's almost like this stuff which we do is incredibly powerful and shouldn't just be used as something for when people are in a hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
I think, and of course, we have to deliver it ourselves from a point of very high presence. Yeah, we have to be present. We have to be I think the word confident is a very good word to use. And also to be the ear, to be the person that is bothered to listen. And actually, for someone to have issues and to feel that somebody is listening, I think is really, really important for those people to think, yeah, someone's just listened to me.
In a non-judgmental way.
Non-judgmental. And I think if you can do that, and of course we have the experience with us, I don't know how many, but I think it's quite rare. I think it's quite rare to actually have the authenticity in the space, to have the ability to be present to somebody, to listen and to give them confidence through listening and to allow them to go deeper. Yeah, because of course, if the trust isn't there, then it'll be very superficial in terms of how the engagement then happens. And of course, we talked about this being effective and impactful for the trading, but it's also about how these people are interacting with their family when they go home. You know, whether they are paying attention to their social life. Many in the trading world are not, because it's such a stupidly long day, and many people can stay plugged in. That they carry the wrong version of self home with them. And that then causes significant tension, which probably then adds to the potential for depression as well if the family life is under pressure, as well as having a very, very difficult trading job. And I think certainly the things that we can share with them professionally can give them a chance. It gives them a chance to actually to be the right version of themselves for whatever they do. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and that's what I love in this process that I described in the beginning, with having this vision and where they are now. Like, it doesn't have to be a vision, a professional vision, you know. It can be also something, how do I want to feel and show up in my private life? What kind of father and husband do I want to be? And then what impact does that have then in return on my career and my performance in my job? So it is all interlinked, and I think we are all part of a system. And if you start making little changes, little tweaks, in one area of the system, then everything adapts and everything will change. So I think, yeah, I totally agree when you say if they feel more healthy and more fulfilled and have like more control, I would say, over their thoughts and manage their feelings in a better way, then that has an impact on how they show up in their private lives, and it has an impact on their whole life in total.
And it affects everyone. We're all, if you go home, you're in quite a unique position. Actually, you're the wife of a trader.
It's not easy.
No.
Because I have all my concepts, and I do help people, and they tell me that it works for them. But if you're in the middle of it, it's really hard. And I'm sometimes also on the roller coaster because, like, I feel a lot of energy. I feel the energy in the room, and it's not always so easy. Yeah. And also then people expect you, oh, you're a psychologist, you're a coach, you have to, I mean, that's not my husband, but other people in my life, they have this, I think, misunderstanding that I'm always,
No, you're probably a wife first and a support second. You can't be, you're not independent enough.
No, no.
To be that. When you work with a client, you're there for the client as a non-judgmental person. You're someone who's come from outside that they can talk to outside, and you have a very unique, different relationship. And I know my wife, if I've ever tried to coach her, she closes me down very quickly. But when she was a wife of a trader, she found life quite difficult sometimes. And she used to say to me, can't you just do another job sometimes? Or, she used to know if it was a bad night, or,
I can relate to that. Yeah.
There's a big lesson there, Steve. Never coach your wife.
Never coach your wife, no. Even raise your children.
That's one way to go.
And I had to learn to really, really ask myself this question, like, what is mine and what is his? I have to ask myself this question. And I also have to, I mean, his markets are quite seasonal. So in summer, it's calmer. In winter, it's more stressful. So I have to also prioritize my own well-being and my mental health, and really have boundaries, because traders they bring home their emotions, and they have those positions on, and it's if you're not like fully self-aware, it's so easy to take it out on your.
My wife used to say she could tell that I had a good day or bad day by the way the car pulled into the drive.
Yeah.
It's literally that. You carry it with you. Unfortunately, quite often it pulled into the drive in the wrong way. So, but, she said that, when I had my best ever year, I did really well. She said, I had no idea you were doing well that year, because, you as a trader, you're always worried about it going wrong. So, it's it was quite bizarre. Actually, it was that year that I was talking about with that trade.
But it's not only around
moments.
It's not only around the negative emotions. It can also be the flip side, the overexcitement, being like full of themselves. You also have to look at those states, because that is also out of the, when we talk about the window of tolerance, it is out of this window.
Yes. It's a crazy job.
Yeah.
And we need a lot of psychologists.
Yeah.
Or at least coaches, or a balance of that. Like I say, I do think that attention to the self is just so vital, and it's so under or poorly understood, underappreciated. So I think the work you're doing is, well, welcome to the club. This work is vital and important.
Yeah, because it's like also like writing when you talk to someone who's outside of your system, like a person you can trust. It also helps you process your emotions and your thoughts and to become more aware of what's going on. And I like this picture of if you have a nightmare, you know, in the middle of the night, you wake up. So if you have a nightmare, you don't go back into your dream and try to change the dream, but you wake up. And I think with coaching, we can help our clients become more aware of what's going on and like wake up in a way of waking up out of what keeps them stuck in this loop in their minds.
Isn't it odd how we can't, you know, you go back to your story, Mark. It was happening to you and you couldn't see it. But it was probably clear to everyone else around you.
And all my senses would have been offline.
Yeah.
And so I would have had no sense of presence. It was just me, you know, sort of getting on with it. I think we have men have this thing, don't they? Because I just get on with it. You know, actually, but you need to step back, I think, and having a coach to give you a hint as to what tools are available, you know, to be used when you will face your challenge, your biggest challenge. To have something in your back pocket for when that challenge comes is very, very useful. But when you go deeper, you'll find that people are already in some state of imbalance, and they need to have balance back in their life. And you know, that's what talking to us does.
And of course, we're not just talking about traders here. We see it in teams where teams come together.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're increasingly doing more coaching of teams and see the team trauma as one big client. So it has a lot of power there. And of course, the leaders are, you know, in these businesses, if they're not making the right decisions for the business because they face their own traumas. So I think, you know, we do work with leaders as coaches. And of course, the understanding of what's going through the minds of the people that they're trying to lead, the traumas they're facing, can help improve the leadership of the businesses too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I see sort of the trading ecosystem as like a complex watch, where, you know, every little piece of that watch needs to be, you know, appropriately aligned and clean and oiled. And in the trading world, of course, that's the poor little chap in the back office that's doing the processing. You know, if that's not going well, then the watch doesn't work as it won't work as it should. And I think that we're finding through the work that Steve and I do is that more people are realizing that their businesses are kind of this sophisticated clock watch, that they do need to bring into the conversations all of the elements that make that watch work. And it's not just the hands on the clock of the, you know, the public facing side of the trading business and the traders. It's the subtle stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the just not being lubricated and the intelligence lubricate. If you can get presence throughout the system, that's probably that probably equates to some degree of mental lubrication. You know, if people are present, because if they're stuck and not present, then things slow down. So yeah, it's great work, and we're very creative around it too. So I think we invent things, you know, because we'll go off and we think, yeah, this is a new thing. No one's talking about this. We've got the ability. Let's dig in and find out. And we've explored all sorts of interesting angles that no one else has. And I guess that's why clients tend to come back to us. So it's an interesting space creatively as well for us.
Yeah.
Listen, sorry, you go ahead, Anna. Sorry.
No, that's what I wanted to echo, that when I follow you and read your newsletters and listen to your podcast, I think that's really the feeling that I get, that you try to serve this this community, those people in the financial markets, traders, those teams that you're working with. I think it's such a powerful service that you're providing. And it really has this ripple effect, like you said, Steve, before, when you work either with an individual or with a team, and then they have realizations and become more aware, then they bring that home and to their friends and families. And I think it's really making the world a little bit better. Mm-hmm.
I think it was like you said, Mark, if you help someone who's, say, in the military, and you help resolve that person's traumas, they go home to their family and their children are much happier. They've got their father back.
The best feedback I've ever had is where someone sent an email saying thank you. I'm now in a much more positive place. That to me, that is everything, and that's what we can do. And of course, that may be very, very profound in terms of whatever they're doing. But if they're in a more positive space, they're going to be better within a family context. They'll be better from an office context and better in terms of their role. So, yeah, that's what we're here for.
Anna, I want to thank you so much for being a great guest and stimulating a really interesting conversation. We're going to put on the notes for the episode, which is happening at a time of great stress in the markets at the moment. We know that. Where can people reach you if they want to find out more about your service, your work? As I say, we put that on the notes for the episode, but if you could just tell people where they can find out more about you.
So I'm on LinkedIn, and also I have a website. It's annafuhrmann.com. Very easy. And I would be super honored if somebody would reach out and is looking for support. Because what you said, Mark, it really, I can relate so much to it. And I think it's not to brag or not to show off, but I think when you support someone and you help someone to overcome like one core fear or one core challenge, it does change people's lives. So, and that's why I love doing that so much, because it's a very real interaction, coaching. It's very real, and you meet this person at a much deeper level, and I try to see them for who they truly are. Like, of course, they tell me everything they can't do and all their problems and all their issues and what's wrong with them. But then I try to see them for who they really are. And I think that's my gift, what I can do to support someone.
Fantastic. And that's the unique bit about you. That's your own little USP there, by the sounds of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you once again for tuning into the Alpha Mind podcast. For listeners who are new or recent joiners, we do have a vast back catalogue of fantastic interviews with guests on all sorts of themes relating to the behavioural, psychological, mindset challenges of trading and investing. So far to date, we have over 140 episodes, and you can find out all about that by going to the alphamindpodcast.com. Also do check out my book, Mastering the Mental Game of Trading, which was published earlier last year and has sold very well. And it goes deep into these issues for traders and investors. Also do check out my book, Mastering the Mental Game of Trading, which was published early last year and goes deep into these sort of issues from a very personal perspective, as from my experience both as a trader and as a performance coach working with traders. Finally, a reminder to check out the Society of Technical Analysts. Their website again is technicalanalysts.com. They are our podcast sponsor and partner, and we do offer listeners a discount on their brilliant home study course. You can find out more about that discount by going to alpha-mind.net. In the meantime, we just wish you the best of luck in the markets and with your trading, and we look forward to you joining us for future episodes of the Alpha Mind podcast.